Hi, everybody. It's Sheila Ryan with Designs with Baby Moon, and I wanted to go over a couple of quick things today just to help you understand some of the files that come in your file set. So, in your file set, you generally get all of the design file formats for various kinds of embroidery machines, the ones that are common right now. You get a PES file, you get a DST file, an EXP file, a HUS file, a JEF file, a VP3 file, and an XXX file. All those are for the common embroidery machines that are on the market. The DST file is a universal embroidery file that will work on any embroidery machine. And just know your machine, look in your manual, find out what format you need, and then that's the design file that you would use on your embroidery machine. There are sometimes a couple of other documents in the file set that you may not be familiar with. One of these in the files that I provide is called a color map. Some other designers may call it a stitch map or production worksheet. Has various names, but I call it a color map because it's basically a map that guides you through the design. And it has a couple of different things. So I have a couple of them up here. I'm going to share my screen so that you can kind of see, and we'll walk through these together. These are specifically for freestanding lace earrings. And as we walk through them, I'll kind of explain my thought process on why I build these designs a certain way. So some of them stitch out like one earring at a time. So you've got 2 earrings in the file set. So you always get enough to make a set at one sitting or one hooping. But sometimes one earring will stitch out completely, and then the next earring will stitch out completely. And I'll talk about why that happens, why we do that, and also how to use the color map to better plan for what's going to happen at the machine, so you'll be able to know better. Okay, so let me share my screen, and you can see what we're talking about here. So the first design file that I'm going to show you is a set of earrings. So this is what you get in the PDF. When you open up, it'll have the name of the embroidery file, and at the end of the name, it'll say colormap.pdf. Adobe Reader is a free program that you can download for your computer or your Mac, and then you just use it to look at these kind of documents. They're PDF documents, and it's not like an editable document. It's not like something you would use in a word processing program. It's just a document. You can print it out and then save it somewhere so you would have a catalog, a physical catalog of the designs that you've purchased. Or you can simply access it on your computer screen. You could access it on your tablet or even on your phone. Whatever mobile device you are. I like to keep these on my computer. I don't necessarily print them all out, although I know people that do. And so anyway, this one is for the firecracker freestanding lace earring designs. And so there's generally at least 2 pages in the color map, and sometimes there's more, and we'll talk about why. The first page is going to be a full-size template of the design file that you've purchased. So these are freestanding lace earrings. They're very small. They're smaller than a 4x4 hoop. And you can see on here that it just shows basically a picture, a computer-generated image of the embroidery design. And then you can also see these little crosshairs right here. See the little crosshairs right in the middle? That kind of shows you like it's going to be centered in the hoop. If you were to print this out and you print it out just at 100%, you don't make the file bigger or smaller or enlarge it in any way on your home printer, you could actually take this, place your hoop over it, and you would see just about how big it's going to be. Well, you would see exactly how big it's going to be on your embroidery machine so that you can plan for what size hoop you're going to use. I like to try to include that information, the size information of the actual design, like how big it is in inches, vertically and horizontally in the listing, so you kind of know already how big it's going to be, and you can kind of figure out what kind of hoop that you're going to use. But if you're concerned about saving stabilizer or getting the best stitch out, what you want to do with embroidery is you want to use the smallest hoop that you possibly can with each design so that your embroidery is supported in the best possible way. This design is super tiny, and you could probably get away with one of those sock hooping hoops if your machine is equipped with one of those. They're very small. They're nice and little. And anyway, you could save a lot of stabilizer by doing that. But if your machine only comes with a 4x4 hoop or even a 5x7 hoop, this will show you the size of the design is actually going to be when it's stitching out. So this is kind of like a template. You could cut out around the just, print it out, cut it out, use that center point and like line that up with the center point in your on your hoop. If you're using one of those hoop guides to show you where the actual center of your hoop is, or you can use the crosshairs if your machine has crosshairs. Sometimes it's a snowman, sometimes it's a laser light, but you can just see where you're going to center that on your hoop. Okay, that's the first page. This just shows you the computer generated image of the design and the colors that the designer may have used when they were thinking about putting this together and showing you what they were thinking. So that's what that is. Okay, the next page, or maybe several pages, depending on how many colors are in the design, is your map. This is your guide for what's going to stitch when. So you can see on here, and let me expand this just a little bit so I can see it. Okay, so you can see on here that this design has 3 steps. The first step is the background for the earrings and the little loop and the edging, everything. It's going to stitch out that first, and you can see the shape of it is highlighted or darkened so that you can see that that's what's stitching then. And I kind of give a suggestion about what color I used. These are just the colors that are in my software. I prefer stitching with isocord embroidery thread for most of my embroidery projects. And so they have a really broad color range. And so I have that set in my software that I digitize with. And so I can really quickly find exactly the color I'm looking for. That's just a guide though. If you have this design has 3 colors, red, brown, and black. And so if you have red, black, and brown, of those 3 colors, it doesn't matter what they're called. It doesn't matter what number they are in your thread, the colors of thread that you have, whatever brand you have, all you need here is a red, a black, and then a brown. Okay. And you don't even have to use red, black, and brown. You can use pink, purple, and green, whatever. You are in charge of this, of your embroidery machine, and you get to tell it what to do. Anyway, well, what it does is it says first that it's going to stitch a background. Then it's going to stitch some shadow at the top of the firecracker area. That's the black part you see on step 2. Step 3 is going to be a little wick. Now, we did firecrackers the other night, and I know that the wicks aren't always brown, but I just wanted to have a different color. Maybe it's yellow, maybe it's white, maybe whatever color. You are in charge of this. In my head, as I was drawing this, I was just thinking a brown string that like a wick. So whatever you want to do. But it just shows you on this map what order you're going to stitch things out in. Okay. That is this design. There's other information on this page. It also shows you the size, again, the inches, how big this is in inches. It shows you how many stitches it's going to be. It does show you that it's going to be 3 colors. If you use a multi-needle machine, you can program this all in, with your 3 colors using 3 different needles of your multi-needle. And the only thing about the freestanding lace designs is that I do recommend that you do stop after each color so that you can change the bobbin when you switch the top thread. So this design is programmed to stop after each color unless you have your machine set to stitch automatically through those. That's a multi-needle function, and most people don't have to worry about that, but just something to know. So that's the rest of the information that I think is really important. There's some information that's interesting to find out. Underneath the color, you see where it says number 1, poppy. It has isocord, that's the brand of thread, polyester, color number 1703. And then it says how many stitches that step is. So you can kind of get an idea how long that's going to take. It says it's going to take 8.1 yards of thread. This is really helpful to know if you're coming to the end of a spool or a cone or even a bobbin, if you're using colorful bobbins. It's really helpful to know how much thread you're going to need for this one project. If you're making a larger project, especially if you're doing like projects for someone else, if say you're an embroidery business and you need to estimate to your customer how much you're going to charge them for doing that embroidery, and you want to know about how much thread. If you need to know how much thread or how many stitches it is, if you calculate your pricing that way, all that information is in the design file, in that color map or that stitch map or the production worksheet. It's all in this file, so you can see how big the file is, how many stitches it takes, and get an idea of how long it's going to take to run that design on your machine. Anyway, it does that for each color. So the black has 148 stitches, the brown part has 100 stitches. And again, now this is the program that I use generates this map based on how I've built the design. Some design files add a couple more stitches. So like the EXP, maybe slightly different, but it's only going to be like 2 or 3 stitches more. It just depends on how the software interprets that for the machine. And so this is basically what you're going to get. So if you are super concerned that your EXP file or your Bernina file has a few more stitches than you expected, open it up, open the file up in your own embroidery software and generate a color map or a printout from your software so you can get that exactly. I know that Embrilliance Essentials will do this. Wilcom Studio will do this. You can print from inside the program. And then also Hatch, many of the major embroidery software programs, even if they're not digitizing programs, will allow you to generate this print out or a PDF of the design that you're working from. Okay, let's look at another one. That one shows you it's going to stitch out, you know, how it's going to stitch out. The next one is a little bit different. And so it has a couple of different, it doesn't just go all of the background, anyway, we'll talk about it. So this is a design for Chinese lantern earrings. They're freestanding lace again. So here's the size. This is the first page. It's got the size. You could print this out, the actual size of the embroidery that it's going to be. And then let's look at the second page. So I'm going to make that bigger so I can see it. So this actually has different color stops. So there's only 2 colors, okay? But you're going to need to switch the design from one color to the next color. So it's got a red first, which is the background, the little loop, and some of the details. And then it's also got a yellow stop where it's going to do some veining on the design in yellow in a different color. Then we're going to go back to red. And then we're going to go back to yellow. So you're going to be switching your thread more times than you may expect on this design. And the reason it does that is because on this design in particular, I wanted that border to cover up the ends of those yellow stitches that stitch second. I want that third border to cover those up so it looks nicer. I just thought it had a more finished look. And the time you spent switching your thread will actually make the design worth it, and you'll be happier with it. But again, you can see you only really need 2 colors. You can see on here that the red is going to be the majority of your thread that you use, and then you're going to use a little bit of yellow. You're not going to use more than 5.2 yards of yellow thread. So if you're coming down to an end of a spool, or if you've got a spool with just a little bit left on it, you want to use that up, this is a great place to do that. So there's just lots of information on here that you can use to make decisions of when you get to your machine, how things are going to go. Let's look at one more color map. And this is just particular for freestanding lace style designs that may have more than one piece in each hooping, like earrings. And so let's go to this next design and I'll show you why I think this is really important to see. This is a design. These are, and again, they're earrings. There's 2 in a hoop. Here's the first page. It's the actual size template when you print it out at 100% on your printer. And you can see where it would be if you centered it in your hoop. Let's look at page 2. This one stitches out a little different. So this one goes black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white. So there's 8 color stops. There's 8 color changes. Let me tell you why. So this design has more than one color in it, but because of the way the design needs to stitch out, we can't stitch out both earrings at the same time. If we were stitch out both earrings at the same time, because of the way the shape is on the stabilizer and in the hoop, we would get what's called a registration error some point in this design. Machine embroidery on freestanding lace things, we're only using stabilizer, the wash away stabilizer, to stabilize the stitches. When your machine is poking down into the stabilizer, your bobbin's coming up and it's grabbing that thread, it's actually pulling on the stabilizer. That's why we've spent a lot of time going over how to hoop properly for freestanding lace designs, because we're not using any fabric to support the stitching. We're only using that stabilizer. And so we've got to be careful that when we're stitching out something, we don't have floppiness or any kind of slack in there, so that the design will stitch as we've intended it to in the software. Let's walk through these steps and we'll tell you what happens when. So you can see on here that we're going to stitch some black first. That's a black of one of the earrings. Then we're going to stitch the white on that earrings. And we're going to go back to black, cover up the edges, and then do some detail work inside. And then we're going to go back to white and add the final detail on that one. That's one whole earring in those first 4 steps. Then we're going to start with the next earring, and we're going to do the other earring the exact same way, but in the next 4 steps. Some people like to use their embroidery software and do what's called a color sort, and that will make all the black stitch at one time and then all the white stitch at one time. Now, your embroidery machine doesn't actually care that these are black and white. This map is for you to help pick your colors better so you can see when you need to change and what you need to change to each color. Some embroidery machines will tell you it's time to use black, or it's time to use white, or it's time to switch to the next color. And then some won't. So it just depends on what machine you have. And if yours does that, then that's great. But if it doesn't, let's rely on the color map to help you know when to change colors. If you were to color sort a design like this and stitch all of the black out first and then all of the white, it wouldn't be in the right order. So your black dot would actually, on the white side, would actually be underneath the white, and your white would stitch on top of the lines that are supposed to be covering up the edges, and it wouldn't work right. The design wouldn't hold together, and your layers of the stitching would not be in the right place. So embroidery is built in layers. So if you think about a 3D layer cake, okay, so you've got the way the digitizer thinks as how the design stitches out on the embroidery machine. And there's a reason for each step being in a certain place. With the pull of the thread on the stabilizer, some designs for freestanding lace are a little bit denser than others, and especially round shapes. Round shapes can be problematic because what we've drawn on the screen doesn't necessarily become round over on what we've drawn on the computer doesn't become round on the machine. And so in order to preserve that round shape with the stabilizer and kind of thinking through how the machine works and how the stitches pull on the stabilizer, in order to get the best round shape, which these need to be round, we're going to stitch them one at a time. And so that's why I've built the file this way. Check the PDF, the color map for the design that you're stitching, and see what the digitizer intended how you to stitch it out. If your design is, it doesn't have layers like this, if it's just, pieces, you may be able to color sort it, especially if you're trying to get multiples in the hoop. On these designs like this, I do not recommend that you color sort them at all because your layers are going to be out of order. And so if you think about a cake, you don't put the frosting down first until you've gotten the layers of your cake built in the right, and then you frost and ice the whole thing. It's like the icing on the cake. You do that after you've built the cake up. So anyway, that's why this design is like this. And then, you don't ever know necessarily when you buy the design how it's going to stitch out first unless you look at the details. So in your tutorial set, there may be another file document. Maybe it's a tutorial on general embroidery, how to do these embroidery designs. There may be a copyright information file in the file set. Dig into those file sets that you get from different designers, see what's in there, and see what you can learn from them. There's always something to learn. Get to know your digitizer and see how they think, or see if they've giving you any clues as to how your designs are intended to run. But do look at those PDF documents that are in your file set and see if you can find something called a color map or a stitch map or a stitch order chart or a thread chart. They're called lots of different things. They're full of really fun and useful information. So I hope that was helpful to you. I'd love to talk to you more about geeky things like color maps and stitch charts in embroidery. And if you'd like to know more, come join my embroidery group, Designs by Baby Moon Friends and Fans, over on Facebook, where we talk about embroidery all day, every day. I'll see you over there. And until then, we'll see you later.